Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Drumbeat, Conversations on Early Childhood Education. My name is Aaron Merchant, and I'm the Director of Early Childhood Education Policy and Programs here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. I'm very excited to welcome our guest today, April Kimball, who's going to have a discussion with us about quality and why it's so important when we talk about childcare. April, you've had a lot of experiences from many different perspectives in the childcare sector. And so before we kick off our conversation, tell us a little bit about your experiences and why you're joining us here today.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm April Kimball, and I'm so glad to be here. I have worked in early childhood what feels like most of my life since I started teaching my stuffed animals when I was in kindergarten. And I always wanted to be a teacher. And I've been a teacher in infant classrooms, toddler classrooms. I've been an assistant teacher, and I moved on to being a trainer and a coach, a early childhood education specialist. I've worked with educators with their programs, administrators. I've also worked with child care resource and referral agencies. And most recently, I have worked with the National Association for the Education of Young Children as a director of quality improvement and program support. And lastly, I've also worked at PBS as the director of professional learning for early childhood educators. And so here I am today.
We're thrilled to have you join us, April. So, as I'm sure you've noticed, in the last, especially 2 years, we've seen CEOs and policymakers and everyone realize what an essential component to the workforce childcare and early childhood education is. And so a lot of people are looking for ways to increase the number of spots available in childcare, looking for ways to increase accessibility. Why is it so important that whenever we talk about any type of childcare solution, that we need to reference quality childcare to make sure there's an emphasis on quality?
So the conversations will start with childcare in general, and quality childcare is that next level. But first, looking at childcare, childcare is a right. It should not be a privilege. Everyone should have access to some form of childcare, whether that be family childcare, family friend and neighbor care. When you have childcare programs within centers, programs, there's so many different settings, and that's really important. Looking at the reason working families, they need that. They need to have access. When you have single parents or a nuclear family, just different types of families, our future generations depend on having someone that is cultivating knowledge and education from that level. Now, looking at quality childcare, you kind of go up a notch, and finding childcare is one thing, and I like to differentiate between daycare, which is an antiquated term that we don't really use, and childcare or early childhood education. In the field, we say daycare cares for days and childcare cares for children, and so I'm really trying to get that more mainstream. But there's kind of been an antiquated view of childcare and an antiquated view of what constitutes quality. And I feel that a lot of people also think that dollar signs equate to quality, and that's not the case. Quality can take different, you can have different approaches to quality. It doesn't have to be a one size fits all, and it doesn't have to break the bank. You can have quality that looks totally different depending on the program. And without access and workplace policies that advocate for working families and early childhood education and advocating for children, we're lost as a society and a community. And it kind of goes on from there. We've seen in the pandemic where now they see that there's a childcare crisis, and there's been a crisis, but I'm so glad to see that the tides have turned to where it's getting more publicity, and we're trying to start making a change.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And April, you mentioned that there are many different types of childcare, and that quality childcare can look different from one scenario to the next. And I think that is, you mentioned there is no one size fits all approach, and that is in part why this childcare equation or this childcare conundrum is so tough to solve. What might work for one family is completely different than what works for their neighbors. And so when we look at quality childcare in different styles and settings, what are different ways that quality is defined? And then who are some of the players that are involved in determining what constitutes quality?
That is a really good question, and it's it's sometimes hard to answer based on certain bodies or certain research, but there are some tenets that remain the same throughout. Trying to assist children and not just assist them, but help them and cultivate and raise them higher with the developmental milestones. And you have cognitive development, gross motor, fine motor development, really someone that's nurturing relationships. You also have the different areas of the environment within the classroom, um, reading, social skills. Like it's a science, but other people can use different bodies to help them to know that there's a mark of quality. So it starts on the level of licensing, just basic licensing, and your local regulatory body and state agencies. They help with making sure that health and safety is the minimum. We're keeping these kids alive and we're keeping them safe, and that's that's like the very basic. And then you start moving to child care resource referral agencies and other organizations that may be able to help a program to raise their quality by assisting them with getting national accreditations or quality rated and improvement systems that are at a state level. And you sometimes see stars or different like levels of ratings. When I worked in Georgia, I suggested that they have different peaches for the levels, and that if someone didn't have a high level, they would be a peach pit. That did not that didn't take off, but you kind of get the idea. But there's different ways, and I like to say that if someone just had an internal audit to say, yeah, we provide quality, look how happy people are, that's not necessarily going to be the mark of quality. You have to have some kind of outside agency or outside person to come in. You have what's called environmental rating scales, the class scale. There's lots of different areas. And when I said national accreditation, there's a few different accrediting bodies where I previously worked. The National Association for the Education of Young Children, NECBA, Cognia. There's so many, I'm sure I've left off several, but those help to make that mark of quality. And they have standards that you have to meet, and that's essential.
And April, you mentioned that when it comes to quality, there are certain, like I said, baseline things that needs to be met. CPR, first aid, background checks, etc. But when it comes to the teacher training and professional development of early childhood educators, you mentioned earlier your work with PBS and some of the things that you've done to work with early childhood educators that can be both innovative and also beneficial to the children that they're providing care to. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. I love helping people and especially educators to take what they know and build on that. And at PBS, we launched a fantastic online early childhood educator training program, and it's asynchronous, and it focused a lot on media best practices within the classroom and more for preschool, pre-K, and kindergarten and first grade. But you have that drive instead of just, okay, let me just take these basic health and safety courses. It's what is it that you're trying to do in your classroom to be better and to learn more and do those best practices. And I am one of those people that cannot sit for very long in a lecture or what would be kind of a traditional training your class. And so when I led the project to launch, we made sure that we had so many different aspects that met learners where they were, no matter where they were in their educational journey. We had interactive games, reflections, and before the course was finished, you had to do an action plan that really tied in all of the concepts to take with you. And you could also take that to other educators. Just like I mentioned earlier, that learning does not start at kindergarten. It also doesn't And when you finished a program, an educational program, when you graduated from high school or got your CDA, associates, bachelor's, and so on and so forth, you have to keep learning. I say this all the time, and any of my old colleagues that are tuning in now will know that I've mentioned this several times. We used to put butter on burns, but we stopped doing that. Research showed that was not the best. And so if we stop learning, we most certainly stop allowing ourselves to get better and learn better and not do what we did 20 years ago, 30 years ago, because we can't say that we didn't know. There was options available. And when you're looking for quality childcare, that's one of the marks of quality to me. You don't just stop and say, look at my program, it's so wonderful. And look, we have this 100 rating, or we have this rating of a 7, or yes, we're a 3-star with quality rated and improvement systems. It's striving to continue. No one is 100% of anything. You always want to find a program that does have teachers that decide, okay, I'm going to continue my education. We're going to have smaller ratios, regardless of how we're going to have to possibly eat that cost, which that's a whole nother conversation on the cost of childcare. But just striving to be better and doing things just outside of yourself. Quality can't be achieved in a vacuum. And as I said before, it's not one size fits all. It's very important to continue growing. And that's why with an accreditation, you have to reaccredit every few years, because you got that gold star now, but you got to keep going and keep moving.
Quality doesn't happen in a vacuum. I love that, April. I'm going to start using that. And you make a great point about the cost and the access, and those are definitely conversations that we're having on the Drumbeat as well. But I cannot thank you enough for your time and for joining us to talk about quality. You've given us a ton to think about, and then we'll also have some resources for the folks who've joined us for this conversation. And so again, thank you so much, April, and this won't be the last time that we talk.
Great. I'd love to come back and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.